Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is September the 23rd, 2024. It has been 3,892 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 215 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 212 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 49 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened over the weekend. Our Russia-Ukraine war map is a great companion to the podcast, and there is a link in the podcast description. There are a lot of map changes today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, Iron House team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. Our assessment that United States military aid to Ukraine will end on September 30th, 2024, beyond already committed deliveries and funding, is regrettably on the brink of being accurate. 2. In our assessment, another round of military assistance delays by the United States will be catastrophic for the Ukrainian armed forces. 3. In our assessment, the fourth failed launch attempt of Russia's new ICBM, the RS-28, undermines Moscow's repeated nuclear threats against Ukraine and its allies. 4. Despite the repeated launch failures and Russia's overuse of nuclear threats, we maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 5. The lack of a meaningful response by Ukraine's allies and international organizations to open and unrestricted attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure by Russia has convinced Moscow this is an effective strategy with no political consequences. 6. Russia will maintain its attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. The continued attacks are increasing the probability of a nuclear accident at one or more of Ukraine's nuclear power plants due to a loss of external power connections. 7. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States is a complete failure that has only encouraged Russia to escalate hybrid and kinetic warfare actions against the NATO alliance and Ukraine's allies and their economic interests. 8. We maintain that autocrat Vladimir Putin's order to recapture the Kursk region of Russia by October the 15th is unrealistic. 9. The Russian economy is much weaker than reported. Here is today's action report summary. From Friday to Sunday, Russia carried out 542 discrete assaults, including a near-record 217 on Friday and 162 on Sunday. Through September the 22nd, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks climbed to 187. Over the previous 7 days, Russia carried out 1,306 attacks, a 22% increase from the previous week, and just short of the all-time record set the week of September the 8th. Yesterday, the VKS carried out 67 airstrikes, dropping 99 bombs, and ground forces carried out almost 5,600 fire missions, a 2024 single-day record. In the Kursk region, Ukraine controls 1,047 square kilometers, with another 294 in the grey zone, for a total area of 1,341 square kilometers. Ukraine controls 83 hamlets, villages and settlements, including important infrastructure facilities such as the Sudzha gas metering facility. Of those, 27 are under administrative control of the provisional government. There is a lot more information in today's situation report, which is over 90 pages that I can't fully cover. There's a link in the podcast description, and learn more about our 7-day free subscription trial. Let's go into the details of what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up the war map on a second device and find the city of Sumy, that's in northeastern Ukraine. There is a link to the map in the podcast description. Ready? Here we go. Today's action report starts in the Russian theater of war in the Kursk Oblast. In the Glushkovsky area of operation, or EO, Ukrainian forces made marginal gains west and east of Obuchovka, and the Russian Ministry of Defense, or Armored, reported fighting continued in the area of Medvezhye, supported by artillery and the VKS. On September the 20th, satellite images suggested that Ukrainian forces were flanking Russian positions in northern Veselaya, and fighting was ongoing in the northwestern part of the settlement. The situation report includes the satellite image, as well as most of the satellite images, pictures and videos I mentioned throughout today's podcast. Fighting also appeared to have moved further east, reaching the farm between Veselaya and Glushkovo, with satellite imagery showing new artillery and burn scars, vehicle tracks across fields, and building damage. A video showed a Ukrainian drone destroying a Russian vehicle attempting to advance in the direction of Veselaya. The new geospatial intel aligns well with the report by Russian propagandist Archangel Z that I told you about last week. In Glushkovo, Ukrainian forces have intensified the number of artillery and drone strikes, with the Glushkovskaya High School heavily damaged and Russian positions attacked in the northeastern part of the settlement. In the village of Lyshinovka, which is north of the same river, a Ukrainian Dragon drone attacked Russian positions. This is one of 2 strikes by Dragon drones in the last 24 hours, a significant distance from the known line of conflict. Kursk Regional Duma deputy Alexei Zolotaryov released a video where they traveled to Tetkino and Glushkovo, attempting to convince residents to evacuate. In the Korenevo EO, Ukrainian forces have stopped all Russian advances, Russian forces have ended offensive operations, and new intelligence has increased our confidence in our map. Satellite images taken on Friday showed new building damage and burning artillery scars in the northern part of Byakhovo and its western outskirts. We maintain that neither combatant holds military control of the village, and it remains in the grey area. Russian sources reported that in the last 24 hours, quote, "the situation in the Korenevo direction has worsened. So far, there is no clear understanding." Through a Russian lens, another valid assessment. Armored reported fighting continued in the area of Obuchovka, that's the one near Korenevo, and we maintain that Ukrainian forces occupy the eastern half of the settlement. Satellite intelligence shows vehicle tracks entering the settlement from the south and new artillery and burn scars. Providing additional support to the assessment, NASA Fire Information for Resource Management Systems, or FIRMS, has shown fires in the settlement through the weekend. Last week, we used terrain analysis to assess the existing line of conflict northwest of Lyubimovka, and new geolocated videos confirmed its accuracy. Attacks by Russian air assault forces, that's the VDV, failed at 3 points where we had assessed that Ukrainian forces were located. Armored reported fighting continued in the area, and Russian mercenary blogger Rybar acknowledged the failed Russian attack. Fighting continued in the area of Lgovka, where the VKS conducted airstrikes. Rybar also reported, without evidence, that Ukrainian positions in the forest area near Krymiana were attacked. Russian mail blogger Yuri Podolyak reported that Russian commanders had stopped the offensive in the Korenevo area of operation because they believe that the Ukrainian offensive toward Glushkovo is the larger threat. This reinforces our original assessment that Russia lacks the resources to push Ukrainian forces out of the Kursk Oblast. In the Lgov operational direction, a Russian video showed Ukrainian positions in western Kamyshovka were attacked, confirming a lone suspect Ukrainian advance from Pogribki. At least one platoon of VDV forces attempted to dislodge Ukrainian forces in Naidonov without success. After suffering losses, the remaining force retreated to the forest belt between Kamyshevka and Naidonov and came under drone-directed artillery fire. Based on the new intelligence, we coded Kamyshovka as contested and made a small adjustment to the line of conflict at Kamyshevka. In the Bolshoe Soldatskoe AO, there is significant fog of war. 4 kilometers from the known line of conflict, satellite images clearly showed the aftermath of multiple Dragon drone attacks on a forested area on the edge of Pervomaiskaya. Over the weekend, NASA firms confirmed there were significant fires in the same area. There was also significant evidence of artillery or drone strikes in Razgrebli and Birdin Farm, with fires burning. Neither combatant has reported fighting in any of these settlements, and we cannot accurately assess why Ukrainian forces used Dragon drones between Razgrebli and Pervomaiskaya. Here are the theater-wide developments in the Kursk region. The British newspaper The Guardian reviewed copies of Russian documents seized during the Kursk Counter-invasion that revealed that Moscow was aware of Ukraine's plans. Most of the documents were from the 2nd Company, 17th Battalion, 488th Guards Motor Infantry Regiment. In mid-June, there was specific, actionable intelligence in the documents warning that Ukraine would launch an assault from the Yunakivka area in Sumy and try to occupy Sudzha. 2 months later, that is exactly what happened. Russian troops were ordered to build new trenches, defensive positions, and models of tanks and place mannequins in them. After constructing decoy reinforcements, Russian troops were supposed to create fake radio traffic, build campfires at night at the sites, and move the dummies around periodically. When Ukraine attacked on the 6th of August, many Russian units were underarmed and had no access to their commanders. They abandoned their defensive positions or surrendered in large groups despite being advised of the looming offensive. This also explains why Ukrainian forces found the Sudzha administrative building barricaded and sandbagged, and record-keeping ending on August the 3rd. What is unclear is why Moscow didn't send actual reinforcements before the counter-invasion, despite the intelligence. Public and private communications showed that the Kremlin had dismissed the scale of the counter-invasion on August the 6th, and then underestimated the size of the Ukrainian attack through August the 9th. The VKS has significantly increased the number of airstrikes on areas still occupied by Russian citizens living under occupation. On Saturday, 25 bombs were dropped, and on Sunday there were 31. Video recording in Sudzha showed recent damage from still burning residential buildings in the western part of the settlement. In a further escalation, the Kron Group released a video showing that the VKS has started using cluster munitions on populated Russian settlements.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Here is what is happening in my home, Ukraine. We start in the Kharkiv Oblast, in the Lipsy-Vovchansk AO. Fighting continued west and south of Glushkovo and in Vovchansk, with no significant changes in the situation. Russian forces have increased the number of attacks near Tykhe, attempting to regain lost positions. In the Kupiansk AO, the situation west of Peshchane has become critical. After securing the heights northwest of the village, Russian forces advanced through the lowlands and forested belts to within 2,000 meters of Kolesnikivka and Krugliakivka and consolidated their gains. As part of setting conditions to assault Ukrainian positions to reach the Oskil River, the VKS bombed the bridge between Sadove and Kupiansk for the second time in a month, destroying the recently repaired structure. We believe the approaches to the Oskil River will be difficult to defend due to the unfavorable terrain, Russian air superiority, and control of the highlands at Pischane. Russian forces continued their attacks in Sinkivka, near Petropavlivka, and near occupied Novoselivske, with no significant change to the situation. In the Luhansk Oblast, west of Svatove, fighting was ongoing in the Stelmachivka area, and Russian forces made new attempts to advance in the direction of Druzhelyubivka and Novoyegorivka. West of Kremenna, Russian forces captured the village of Makiyivka, despite suffering catastrophic losses in the process. On Saturday, Russian forces also advanced over 2,000 meters, reaching the southern part of Nevske, raising a flag less than 100 meters from the critical natural defensive line of the Zherebets River. The Russian advance has split the Ukrainian defense west of Svatove and Kremenna. It will severely compromise the continued defense of the areas east of Terny, Yampolivka and Torske. Moving to assessment. This new Russian advance could have significant implications through the rest of 2024 and early 2025. If Russian troops can clear Ukrainian forces east of the Zherebets River to Torske, it could force a withdrawal from the Serebryansky forest. A withdrawal from Serebryanka will complicate the continued defense of Bilogorivka and ultimately the logistics hub of Siversk. Unlike Pischane, the terrain remains favorable for Ukrainian forces defending the Zherebets, although they will now be pressed from two directions. The situation for Ukrainian forces in the Donbass has significantly deteriorated over the weekend. In the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast, in the Siversk area, the operational tempo remained low. Positional fighting was reported near Bilogorivka, and Russian forces tried to expand a recent 500-meter advance southeast of Vyimka. In the Konstantinivka AO, Russian forces reached the eastern edge of Grigorivka, where heavy fighting was ongoing. Russian advances were stopped at the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal in Kalynivka and the canal district of Chasiv Yar, and Russian troops were contained east of Stupochke. Fighting was also reported in the southern part of Klishchiivka. Over the weekend, in the Toretsk-New York AO, the Ukrainian defenses were breached. Russian forces advanced into the center of Toretsk and are located southeast of School No. 6. There are only 3 blocks of high-rise buildings and the coal mine outside of Russian control, and the VKS continues to bomb the area. If Russian forces capture these 2 areas, the remaining area will be difficult to defend. Russian mechanized infantry advanced through Nelipivka and reached the village of Leonidivka, a 4-kilometer advance. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, or GSAFU, reported fighting in the area of Sherbynivka, indicating that Russian troops were able to secure their new positions. In the southwestern part of the Donetsk Oblast, honestly, it was much better. While intense fighting has continued in the Pokrovsk AO, Russian commanders appear to have deprioritized the region to take advantage of advances at Kurachovo and Vuhledar. Ukrainian forces continue to hold the north flank, as well as holding back Russian advances in northern Grodivka, Krasny Yar and Novogrodivka. Russian forces were visually confirmed in the western part of Grodivka, and the map was adjusted. On the northern edge of Novo-Alexandrivka, Ukraine used a Dragon drone to burn out Russian troops. Ukrainian forces continued to control parts of Marinivka and Mikhailivka, and Russian forces still have not reached Selidove. Intense fighting also continued in the Kurachovo AO. In the area of Ukrainsk, Russian forces were pressuring Ukrainian defenses near Tsukurine and Hirnek. Fighting continued in Zhelanne Persha, but it was unclear if Ukrainian forces still held a significant part of the village. To the south, GSAFU reported fighting in the area of Zhelanne Druge. On Thursday and Friday, Russian assaults across the area involved 165 armored vehicles. Ukrainian troops were heroic in their defense, repulsing most of the attacks, particularly in the area of Maximilianivka and Pobeda. Russian troops were able to advance through Ostre in the direction of Ostrivske. Further south, Russian armored assaults in the area of Kostiantynivka were repulsed by the Ukrainian 79th Air Assault Brigade. In the Vuhledar area, Ukrainian forces will likely be forced to withdraw. While Russian advances have been held back at the Pivdenno-Donbasska coal mine No. 1 and No. 3 to the west, Russian forces were able to cross the Kashlagach River northeast of occupied Prechistevka and advance up to 2,000 meters in the direction of Vuhledar. Russian troops are also approaching Vuhledar from the east, advancing from occupied Mykilske. Ukrainian forces in the settlement are in a partial encirclement with a single ground line of communication, or GLOC, that's a supply line, to Bogoyavlenka remaining. Heavy fighting continued on all sides of Vuhledar, and in our assessment, Ukrainian forces need to withdraw or risk encirclement. And in the Vremivka area, Russian troops were able to advance 400 meters north of occupied Staromayorske and reached the southern edge of Makarivka. In the Zaporizhia Oblast, there were only reports of light positional fighting. The IAEA did provide an update on the status of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The specialists continued to hear explosions at various distances, including several close to the ZNPP. Last week, Russian occupiers claimed that 2 power lines supplying the settlement of Enerhodar had been damaged by unspecified military activities on Tuesday, requiring the use of diesel generators to operate the pumping station for tap water, including at ZNPP. The IAEA was able to inspect the pumping station of the Unit 5 reactor and noted that the cooling pond had dropped 2.2 meters since June 2023. On Friday, President Zelensky announced that the IAEA has adopted a resolution declaring that Russian troops and Rosatom personnel must leave the NPP immediately and transfer its control and operation to Ukraine. The statement reaffirmed that the IAEA does not recognize Moscow's ownership claim to the plant. On Friday, I told you how ammunition kept exploding in Russia. Today, I can tell you that even more ammunition was blown up. On Friday night, in the Tver Oblast, Ukrainian drones struck the 23rd Main Missile and Artillery Directorate, or GRAU, arsenal in Oktябrьsky, 16 kilometers south of the 107th GRAU arsenal in Toropets. As usual, Russia's official position was all drones were intercepted, but debris started a fire. Several area villages were evacuated, and the M9 highway, 2 kilometers to the south, was closed. On Sunday, high-resolution satellite images showed that 67 warehouses were destroyed, 12 were visibly damaged, and 25 were untouched. It was reported that up to 14,000 metric tons of ammunition was stored at the facility, including short-range ballistic missiles. Almost at the same time, Ukrainian drones struck the Russian ammunition depot and logistics hub near Tikhoretsk in the Krasnodar Krai. The attack occurred as a train carrying up to 2,000 metric tons of ammunition arrived, with another 10,000 tons stored at the facility. Most of the ammunition was located in open-air abutments, resulting in the dramatic cook-off of munitions, including Smerch rockets that were found over 10 kilometers away. High-resolution satellite images after the attack showed the arsenal engulfed in flames. The strike may have also damaged towed artillery systems stored at the base, with 58 visible in a 2024 satellite pass. British and Estonian intelligence reported that over 30,000 metric tons of ammunition was destroyed last week at the 107th GRAU arsenal in Toropets. Satellite images confirmed that an ammunition train with up to 50 cars was at the depot at the time of the attack. The revelation that 2 attacks were coordinated with the arrival of new ammunition shows that Ukraine's allies grossly underestimate Kyiv's intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance capabilities. On Saturday, at the Plesetsk Cosmodrome in the Arkhangelsk Oblast, an RS-28 Sarmat ICBM catastrophically exploded during a test launch at the Yubileyная ICBM test site. Before and after, high-resolution satellite images from Maxar show that the missile exploded in the test silo, leaving a 62-meter-wide crater, obliterating most of the test site, and fires burning in the adjacent forests. The RS-28 was supposed to reach operational status by 2018. The last 4 test launches have failed, with 3 explosions at lift-off or briefly after, and 1 breaking apart during the boost phase. In the Krasnodar Krai, the former headquarters of the private military company Wagner Group in Molkino, which now houses the Rosgvardia Africa Corps, was consumed by a fire set by an arsonist. Russian officials say the cause of the fire was electrical. Former PMC Wagner members claim that over $1 million in radio equipment and years of records were destroyed.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/Malcontent News.
It's time for today's Theaterwide update. After arriving in the United States, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky toured the Scranton Army ammunition plant in Pennsylvania, where 155mm artillery rounds are produced. While touring the plant, Zelensky wrote messages on several artillery shells and addressed the workers at the plant. Here is President Zelensky.
Thank you so much. This applause is not to me, really. Everything is to you and for your work. Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here with my team. And started, as I said to colleagues, started my visit to America from your city, from your plant, from Pennsylvania. And you said that 400 people work here. But I wanted very much to come here and to thank you. 400 people saved millions of Ukrainians. Because of the result of your work, I'm very thankful, just from ordinary Ukrainians to you.
Zelensky plans to meet with Vice President and U.S. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris and former President and Republican candidate Donald Trump between September the 26th and the 27th. During his flight on a U.S. military aircraft, Zelensky recorded a video outlining how critical the visit to the United States is. Quote, "This fall will determine the future of this war. Together with our partners, we can strengthen our positions as needed for our victory, a shared victory for a truly just peace." In an interview with the U.S. magazine The New Yorker, Zelensky said that Donald Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, is, quote, "too radical in his ideas, and his plan to end the Russia-Ukraine war will lead to global conflict." On September the 12th, during an interview with Ryan Shaw, Vance said that Trump's peace plan would give Russia the areas currently occupied, approximately 20% of Ukrainian territory. Here is Senator J.D. Vance.
Ukraine wants this war to end. Europe, which, by the way, has underfunded this war while American taxpayers have been very generous to the Ukrainians, the Europeans want this war to end because it's jacking up their energy prices. So I think what this looks like is Trump sits down, he says to the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Europeans, you guys need to figure out what does a peaceful settlement look like. And what it probably looks like is something like the current line of demarcation between Russia and Ukraine. That becomes like a demilitarized zone. It's heavily fortified so the Russians don't invade again. Ukraine remains its independent sovereignty. Russia gets the guarantee of neutrality from Ukraine. It doesn't join NATO. It doesn't join, some of these sort of allied institutions. And I think that's ultimately what this looks like.
Speaking for the first time about the Trump-Vance plan, Zelensky said, quote, "I don't take Vance's words seriously because if this were a plan, then America is headed for global conflict. It will involve Israel, Lebanon, Iran, Taiwan, and China, as well as many African countries. That approach would broadcast to the world the following implicit rule: I came, I conquered, now this is mine." Zelensky added that he feels, quote, "Trump doesn't really know how to stop a war, even if he thinks he does." Asked if US President Joe Biden and his administration refused to support the Ukrainian victory plan, Zelensky said that Kyiv would live according to, quote, "Plan B." "We have been living in Plan B for years because Plan A was proposed even before the full-scale war. It was aimed at preventive measures strengthening Ukraine, but the partners did not listen to us." Zelensky also issued a warning, saying, quote, "If Biden refuses, it's a terrible thought. That would mean Biden doesn't want to end the war in any way that denies Russia a victory, and that would lead to a very long war, an impossible, exhausting situation that would kill a huge number of people." After arriving at the White House on Marine One, journalist Alex Raufoglu asked President Biden if he had decided to allow Ukraine to conduct deep strikes on Russia, with the president replying, quote, "No." On Monday, the United States Department of Defense is expected to announce a $375 million military aid package for Ukraine, likely the last one at least until December 2024, and possibly ever. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson announced that Republicans and Democrats had reached a deal to submit a clean continuing resolution to prevent the government from closing down through December 20th, 2024. The bill does not include an extension for almost $6 billion in presidential drawdown authority that will expire on September 30th, and does not provide additional funds to replenish U.S. weapons stockpiles. Defense Minister of Ukraine Rustem Umerov said that Ukraine was in advanced talks to acquire Saab JAS-39 Gripen and Eurofighter Typhoons to bolster its air force. This is in addition to the F-16s already in service and the French Mirage 2005 jets expected to enter the theater of war in early 2025. Umerov also said that Kyiv has verbal agreements from unnamed Western partners to fund the production of Ukraine's domestically designed missile program. The Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Støre, proposed increasing aid to Ukraine to $13 billion through 2030, almost doubling the current commitment while extending it another 3 years. Croatia reportedly delivered the second An-32B twin-engine turboprop transport plane to Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Kyiv and announced a new $700 million non-military aid package to Ukraine. It includes $325 million to support the electrical grid, $290 million in humanitarian support, and $102 million for demining operations. Our War Crimes and Human Rights section can cover difficult topics, including torture, gender-based violence, war crimes, and violence against children. Today's report does not include graphic content. The IAEA reported that on September 14th, Russian forces shelled the subcritical neutron source installation located in the Kharkiv Institute of Physics and Technology. The facility has been repeatedly attacked by Russia since 2022. The latest incident did not cause a radiological release, and all radioactive material at the site remains secure. In the Kherson region, Russian drone operators continued their hunt of civilians, which they call safari, and documented their war crimes online. Separate drone attacks on Sunday wounded 7. Russian drone operators have started hunting civilians in the Nikopol district of the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. A Russian drone struck a car, killing a 12-year-old girl and a 25-year-old woman. A man and a 4-year-old girl were critically wounded in the same attack and are in hospital. Let's go to the land of Mobix, mobilization and mir. The US newspaper, The Washington Post, wrote that the Kremlin is increasingly aware that its doctrine of nuclear threats as a projection of power is losing its effectiveness. Reportedly, autocrat Vladimir Putin wants a more, quote, elegant and restrained response. I have an idea. Go home. Reuters Thompson reported that while Russia received over 200 fast 360 short-range ballistic missiles from Iran, they did not receive any launchers or support vehicles. A US official and a European intelligence officer verified the information. Theories on why the launch and support vehicles weren't provided range from Russia wanting to develop their own platforms to Iranian officials hoping for a positive outcome in upcoming negotiations with Western states. Members of Russia's Storm Z penal units appealed for support from the state, saying that they are being denied medical treatment despite paying their debts to the motherland. Quote, "One is literally missing half of his head, so the bone was impacted. This is our appeal. We don't want more than others, only justice." The main Defense Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom reported that Russia has lost 610,000 military personnel since February 2022, killed and wounded, and payments to current and former Russian service members now represent 8% of Russia's entire federal budget. The Russian claim that the Ukrainian counter-invasion of the Kursk Oblast caused a spike in new volunteers is not supported by data. A growing number of 83 federal districts of Russia are missing their recruitment targets despite signing bonuses of $21,500 and higher, and monthly salaries that are 5 times larger than the average Russian worker. The 8-page decree put Deputy Chairman of the Security Council of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, in charge of the new Interdepartmental Commission of the Security of the Russian Federation. The appointment further highlights Putin's distrust of anyone outside of his closest circle. Following the lead of Meta, Chinese company ByteDance removed the accounts of RT International, Sputnik Serbia, Sputnik Afrique, Sputnik Africa, Sputnik International, Sputnik Brazil, Sputnik Mundo, and Sputnik Indonesia from TikTok. The removal comes a week after the US State Department announced new sanctions against RT, formerly known as Russia Today. Russian state media channel Sputnik accused ByteDance of supporting a, quote, globalist attack and permitting TikTok to be taken over by the US, quote, deep state. TikTok is currently banned in China and India and heavily restricted in Russia. Despite Russia's protests about TikTok, the Deputy Speaker of the State Duma, Deputy Boris Chernyshov, said that Moscow would fully block YouTube in the coming weeks after monetization programs for RuTube and VK are created. While not banned, Russia has throttled the speed of YouTube to the point that it is almost unusable. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.